for joining the Broadway Drumming 101 podcast with your host, Clayton Craddock.
Jon Berger calls himself a musical linguist. He's a graduate of SUNY Purchase and has worked with artists such as Aretha Franklin, Little Anthony and the Imperials, the Crystals, Garden State Philharmonic, and the Harrisburg Symphony, just to name a few. He's worked on shows such as Next to Normal, In the Heights, Jersey Boys, Tale of Two Cities, Les Mis, Pirate Queen, The Color Purple, The Grinch, Fiddler on the Roof, Gypsy, Imaginary Friends, Flower Drum Song, Suessical, Cats, Saturday Night Fever, Hello Dolly, My Fair Lady, Summer, and Jersey Boys. He's a fellow Paiste endorser and is currently on the road with the Roy Orbison Buddy Holly Hologram Tour. Welcome to Broadway Drumming 101. My guest today is Jon Berger. Thank you for taking time out of your tour to be a part of this podcast.
Thank you, Clayton. I really appreciate you including me in this amazing thing you're doing. And yeah.
Before we started recording, we were talking about the joys of traveling and sometimes the perils of being a touring musician. But we caught up with each other in Toronto. You were on a tour, and right now you're on a tour. Tell me what you're doing.
I'm doing the Rock and Roll Dreams tour. It's a live band backing holograms of Buddy Holly and Roy Orbison. And when I saw you in Toronto, that was the first U.S. tour. And that version was, we picked up a 50-piece orchestra in each city. So the conductor, Martin Axe, and myself traveled with the show, and we rehearsed, much like with Broadway tours, we rehearsed the orchestra, three-hour rehearsal in each town, and then did the show, and then moved on. And so this is now the third tour. Of course, there's two years of the shutdown, but they came, to our surprise, they came back. So this last tour and this tour now is with just the rhythm section. We had 7 pieces on the last tour, and they needed to scale down a little bit this time. So we're now just a 4-piece band, guitar, bass, drums, and a singer. And we're backing up these holograms. And the basic idea of this tour, which is kind of interesting, is what would it be like to see these iconic pioneers of, rock and roll today? And, you really have to see it. It's hard to describe. You just have to see it. It really looks like they're on stage, and the band's lit up, and they want us to be really animated to bring life to the show. And, and it's quite interesting. Having spent a career backing all kinds of singers and cabaret acts and stars, and, to be backing a hologram who never even knows my name or talks to me, or if I decide to play a cool fill, they never turn around and say, "What are you doing?" It's so that's kind of what it is.
So you never get yelled at by the performer, like you're rushing, you're dragging. None of that.
Well, that's a whole other thing. Just really briefly, I'll describe the interesting thing that happened with this show. Is these are original? They're using original recordings of these performers. I'm not at liberty to discuss any more about the technology, but nonetheless. Martin Axe, who did the arrangements for this, he had the very challenging task to do what's called a click mapping. So imagine having to put a click track to recordings that never had a click track. So with using a computer, you basically figure out where the tempo shifts are, and you try to find a sort of middle ground and keep it as smooth as possible. So what this means is we're playing with a click track that's constantly moving. And so it's something that most people will not experience and in their lives. And it's quite a challenge. I learned that Roy Orbison was a very solid rhythm guitar player. And so his time is actually quite good for the most part. And it's just, naturally, I mean, there are plenty of recordings with our favorite people that have no click track. And if the tempo shifts a little bit naturally. However, the young Buddy Holly, who sadly died at 22, wrote all these iconic songs. He's like all over the place. So in rehearsal, it's kind of maddening. And then you kind of learn, you're listening to these tracks, and there were some tracks we're playing with. They kept some of the orchestral stuff, and now we have some piano and guitar on there. Their guitarist had overdubbed, and Martin had overdubbed. So we have to figure out, where do we play with the vocals? Where do we ignore the click? Where do we, and some tunes there's a count off for each tune. The show starts and stops. First act, second act. It just goes. So you'll get a count off, and there's one ballad. It's like 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, and the vocal comes in a completely different tempo. So, after doing it night after night, but in rehearsals, you're just like, we'd come out of rehearsals like exhausted, like, I guess my time stinks, because you're like, so it's very challenging that way. We've been doing the show long enough that we know, and my friends have come see the show, say it feels seamless, but there's still times when it's like a real concentration burn, because this click is it's following the singer, so, and we've all experienced this playing shows. It's like, singers sometimes can sort of do their own thing, what they call back phrasing, which I've often called bad time, but, nonetheless, you want to make it feel smooth. So that's the long and short of it. That's the challenge of this gig, that people come to see the show have no idea what we're dealing with. But at this point, we just play music, and our job is to bring life to the show and make it feel good. And so, that's in a nutshell what I'm doing now.
How long is the tour going out?
It's the total of 2 months. We come back March 20th. This was booked pretty last minute, so there's a lot of traveling involved and not that many shows. Previous tours, we did like 26 cities in 6 weeks. It's a lot. So fortunately, I have a gig. It's great. They were able to put this together, and show's going well. It's actually selling better than it has before, and they are planning some dates in the future. They have some things in the books, maybe in the fall. So, hopefully there'll be more work. So I'm thrilled to be out playing live music for people. Well, for the most part, live music. But yeah, we did a talk back recently with some patrons in Michigan, and they loved it. Also, mostly older audience, but they really loved it. They loved the live band, and so I think it's real fortune to be doing this and playing music for people. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, you call yourself a musical linguist. Person accomplished in languages. Mm-hmm. Tell me, where'd you get that? It's a very cool way to describe yourself. Why do you call yourself a musical linguist?
Because I was raised in a very open-minded family that loved music. I was exposed to everything you can think of. Lived near New York City, got to see so many different types of concerts, orchestral, ballet, rock concerts, Broadway shows, and I just love it all. And throughout my career, I've been able to study with, to learn, to play with musicians and learn about music from all over the place. And I speak, I teach quite a bit. And I started to talk to kids about this, that my students, that music, learning styles of music is like learning a language. It's not just like, a lot of drummers will like learn a beat and I want to play that beat and I want to play this fill. It's number 5A here. And to me, it's more about learning the language and eventually learning the dialect and learning to apply that and learning in real time with the music itself. And so I've had a lot of great opportunities to do that. And, I wear a lot of different hats. I've played out so many different styles of music and love so many different styles of music. So, in my mind, I'm a multi-linguist in terms of music.
Well, where'd you grow up? In New York City?
No, Rockland County in Pomona, New York. It's about 30 miles north of Manhattan.
Did you have a musical family?
They were musically oriented. Like I said, my mother was always playing KCR, the jazz station. She was playing QXR, the classical music and Broadway shows. And this is something I don't really talk about a lot. A part of my life that many people don't know about is when I was about 3 years old, we were traveling and my mother had been playing guitar, teaching guitar. And there was kind of what they call a coffee house, basically like an open mic at this place we're staying at, somewhere in Michigan maybe. And she wanted to go sing a song the first time in her life. And she wanted to bring the kids and they said, kids can't come in here, it's a bar. But if the kids sing with you, they can come in. So this light bulb went off in her head. And we became a group called the Berger Folk. It just kind of developed. And so from that point on until I left for college. And basically I was starting to play in a heavy metal band and kind of wanted to get away from that. But we traveled, and we also love to travel. My dad was a dentist, and he didn't really like what he was doing, and he loved to travel too. So we would spend entire summers across the country. Went over to Europe several times. My mother was very ambitious, and she loved the limelight. My mother loved being on stage. I think, honestly, a lot of this was my mother just wanted to be on stage, and we tagged along. But we became this group, and we started learning traditional folk music and sing along stuff, and we played some amazing festivals, folk festival of the Smokies with like Earl Scruggs, and we did some stuff in New York City with Richie Havens and Don McLean and all these iconic people. And that part, being around that kind of stuff and that energy was amazing. And I started to incorporate a little bit of drums and percussion, and we got signed on Folkways Records and did a couple of records. And I was able to play. I played drums on a few of those. I didn't really want to do it, and my sisters and I didn't really want to do it. But it's like we kind of had no choice. And so I don't want to paint the negative picture about it, because it was kind of a rare and amazing experience. My goals were really to become like a quote unquote session musician and just play a lot of different music with different bands. And I was studying music and doing all that stuff, but because we were always out singing, I couldn't do Little League. I wanted to do Boy Scouts, all this kind of stuff. And, so once I got into music school, it was like, I'd say just I have a rehearsal, or be rehearsing with my metal band and my punk band. It's like, I have a rehearsal. I can't go. And I just sort of, my sister's the same thing, went to college. And it's like, we got to study. So we all kind of, we broke the band up. So to speak.
I was about to say the band broke up. Well, are there any LPs lying around? Any 8-tracks? Any?
If you go online, it's the Berger folk. There, I think we have 3 records. Feel free if you want to. My mother got a couple of copies of us for CDs one Christmas, and I just basically put them away. It's like there's even some things of me before my voice changed singing, and
Oh wow! Do you still sing?
No, I mean once in a while, maybe a little background stuff here and there, but it's like I said, I don't really talk about that part of my life because it was a lot of it was good. I love the traveling and some of the festival stuff, being around these amazing other artists, but my ambitions were to do what I'm doing now, and I was fortunately was able to break away and do my thing. It's not, my parents completely supported what I was doing. I mean, they bought me drums and lessons and all that, but it was just interesting, part of my life that just sort of happened. And
I'm gonna go look for the Berger folk on YouTube, man. I'm sure there's probably some footage out there.
I don't know about footage, but yeah.
You said you were playing in the heavy metal and punk bands. Like, what got you into heavy metal? And I'm sure back then your hair was down to your shoulders, or were you always?
Well, I tried very hard to have big hair. My mom paid for perms, and I was trying really hard to have the big hair thing. I just like the music. I mean, Led Zeppelin was when first time I heard that band, it was just like, John Bonham and just the arrangements. It blew my mind. It was just the most beautiful thing I ever heard. And we were playing some Kiss and some the Runaways and Rick Derringer. I love Rick Derringer. This drummer at the time, Vinny Appice, really was incredible. I don't know. There was just something about that music that really resonated with me. I think that the power of the music and groove, and then my first band was actually a band called Bandit. I was in high school, and I was we had this interesting community theater. It's called a traveling theater. The original shows by an amazing composer named Shep Stern, who went on to great success as jingle writer. But he created this thing, and they do these original musicals, really creative shows, and we travel around. Those band shells they have in each town. They open up. So we play in the parks, and so I met the keyboard player. I met him there. He was in the cast. He introduced me to his friend, who was a bass player, and we started this band. And the guitarist, a younger guitarist I was in high school with, Bert Johnson, he's had a pretty a decent career playing guitar as I got older. But we started this band. We were playing like school dances and that kind of thing. And then that kind of became something else. I, met some other musicians, and we kind of the group was called Bandit, and then Nitrous Oxide. That was the metal band. This giant whippet behind my head, and even though my dad was a dentist, they're like, "Call your dad, dude. We got to get some whip." I'm like, no. And one afternoon they got on the phone. They're trying to talk like adults, like, "This is Dr. Smith, and we really need a giant stat. We need some." They're like, "What are you guys doing?" Anyway, we play keg parties, and the first time the police came and shut us down, we were like, yeah, we're on our way. So it was just another chance to learn some more languages of music that I really loved, resonated with me, and in the midst of all that, I was studying. I got very interesting and fortunate background. My greats, when I started reading music when I was 8. I'd been playing since I'm about 2, just on my own. Just, I don't know why, I just started banging on stuff. But in the 4th grade, I started reading music, and Joe Vasili at Limekiln Elementary School, he had gotten a degree in classical percussion. So my very first music teacher was a drummer, percussionist, which is incredible. Very strict, classical kind of training. He taught me traditional grip and how to read, playing the band. And it was just a little interesting tidbit. There's this one tune, I think I actually still have the chart. I don't know how it hasn't like gone into the ether. There was this one part where I was already playing drum set then, and I said, "Hey, would you mind if I play like a jazz beat on the hi-hat for this part?" I don't know why I even suggested this, and just, a stupid little band tune. He goes, "Yeah, sure." So he let me improvise this little part, in this, and he was like just really, really cool guy. And then I went off to junior high school, and band director there, Danny Sicente, had gone to Manhattan School of Music and studied percussion. So once again, we had a percussion ensemble, which at that time was a very rare thing, jazz band. And he became my private teacher. So, two of my teachers in a row, and he's responsible. Danny's really responsible for my career. About a few years in, he's got me on timpani and mallets, and he said, "Look, you're going to be a professional musician. You're going to work in New York City. I wanted to go to Berkeley, and and study jazz and fusion and stuff I was starting to get into." And he said, "You have that stuff pretty together, but you really need to focus on getting a strong foundation in percussion." And thanks to him, 40 plus years later, I'm still working, and
what made you decide to go to SUNY Purchase?
Well, it's a couple of things. I got into Manhattan School of Music. Actually, he had me audition for his teacher, Paul Price, who's a legendary percussion teacher. And I got into Manhattan School, but I had just learned treble and bass clef. So basically, it was an expensive school. My parents would not allow me to live in Manhattan. Had to commute from Rockland. And I was going to have to take 0-level classes, which means take all the required classes, but for no credit until I caught up to the level. Even though I got in as with my skills, I was waitlisted at Purchase, and this is going to sound kind of funny, but it was serendipitous. I got in August, I think it was. I got the letter that I was accepted at Purchase. So my mom took me up to the campus, and it was a brand new school, only a couple of years old. I heard very good things about it, but there was a young girl giving us a tour, and she said, "Here are the dorms." And all I could think of was, this is my way to get out of the house, get away from the Berger folk. And it was maybe a stupid plan in the moment. I said, "Mom, this is the school for me. I heard it's great." The school was incredible. I mean, it could not have been better. Close to New York City. I studied timpani for 4 years, the Metropolitan Opera, with the principal there, Dick Horowitz, who was just kicked my ass. And, I'm still getting timpani gigs today because of him. Ray DeRoche completely opened up my mind, turned me from a rock drummer into a musician. and just the endless hours rehearsing with percussion ensemble, playing with orchestras. It could not have been. And I literally it was complete stupid leap of faith, I'll call it. I just wanted to get the hell out of the house. But it could not have worked out better. Like I said, I was, 18 years old. I had just barely learned to read treble and bass clef. I had played enough xylophone to get me into the school. They saw I had some talent. My timpani playing was pretty good. But the main thing was my theory. I was with people that had been playing cello since they're 12 years old. I was drowning. My freshman theory teacher was the utmost Mozart scholar on the East Coast. I mean, I was like drowning. I literally lost all my hair. It was so stressful, all that stuff. I eventually sort of, figured things out, but I'm literally going, every good boy does fine. And these, one of the theory teachers would sit down at 8 a.m. He'd be pounding out Beethoven and he'd say, okay, drummers, let me see what you wrote down, and we were supposed to write down, and it was just like, so it was, there was a lot of stress involved, but no regrets whatsoever. And the other side of this is that SUNY Purchase back then was a state university. I was a state resident, Clayton. It was $4,000 a year, living on campus with a full meal plan.
Wow.
So that's the other side of the reason. I was certainly aware of that. Manhattan School was...
It's $4,000 a week now. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. I don't remember what... we're talking about 1978. I don't remember what Manhattan School was, but it was really expensive. And anyway, and also, the other thing is great, amazing training from my percussion teachers. And you have to do it's kind of like the equivalent of a thesis, I suppose. You have to do a junior recital and a senior recital. You spend the entire year preparing for this. This is huge thing. You do a lot of solo pieces on mallets, on timpani, percussion ensemble things. Sometimes you conduct a piece, and this is the big part of your grade, and it's terrifying. Senior year, I played a Bach cello suite on marimba. It's solo. I was like, my hands were like, quaking. I was just, so I got through all that stuff, but there was this one intense theory course called modal counterpoint, which is, maybe I suppose like the equivalent of trigonometry. It's just like, when I'm ever going to use this stuff, I don't know. It's deep theory. I failed that class. I had to go back over the summer after killing myself. I had to go back, and I was playing with my punk band, which was kind of on our way, getting some radio play, and, seemingly on our way. It was a really great band, playing together for a long time. And I had a job putting bicycles together at Toys R Us. I was just so depressed. It's like, and I had to take this theory class one-on-one with this nerdy professor who I said to him, how am I going to use this? Honestly, tell me honestly, when am I going to use this stuff? And he just said to me very coldly, well, why didn't you go to Berkeley School of Music? And it's like, okay, whatever. So I don't know how I got through this class, but right place at the right time. One of my colleagues had gotten some work teaching theory. The clarinet player got teaching theory at the school. And she said, hey, John, I just got a call. Someone needs a percussionist for this bus and truck tour of a show called Tintypes. So I somehow eked through that class, and I went on the road immediately. And I paid off my college loan. It was a non-union bus and truck. And in 6 months, I paid off my loan. And this is Broadway, 101. This was the start. I had no intentions. I love Broadway shows. I'd go see them. It was really cool. And I'd see guys in the pit. I thought that was kind of neat. So yeah, it'd be fun to do someday. But I wanted to be a session player. I wanted to play with Weather Report or with Jeff Beck or, the Police, All of a sudden, I'm like playing this Broadway show. It was drums and percussion, and a couple of older people in the thing that had been around a little longer than I had, and that was how it all started.
What was the show again?
Called Tintypes. It was a musical review. It only ran about 6 months on Broadway, and it basically, the tintype camera. It was an old camera. Yeah. So basically, they would do these snippets from the 19th century into the early 20th century. They made like with snippets of time, and they would kind of talk about history and that music. So it was a lot of ragtime stuff and some early jazz. Got to see all of a sudden I'm traveling around the country and making money. It was more money than I ever seen in my life. You know, it was like a whopping $650 a week in per diem, and I was like, I'm rich. You know, So yeah.
I hear you. That's kind of how I started too, as a bus and truck tour of a show called Footloose, and traveling around the country. And I was making $750, and again, I thought I was rich, and I paid off my student loans. I'm like, man, this Broadway thing, man. But then I abandoned all that. I didn't really abandon it. When I got off of that tour, I did a show called Tick Tick Boom off Broadway. Yeah. But when I got there, I think we were making $525 a week, and I was like, man, I'm in the city, I'm making $525, and I'm doing a show. But I didn't realize how big the show was going to be, and then anyway, again, enough about me. So you got you did the tour. Did you move to New York City right after that?
I did. My best friends growing up had an apartment, a beautiful big apartment in Park Slope, 7th Avenue and Flatbush, and rooftop. And so I moved in with them for a while. It was like enough,
What year was this?
This was about 1983. Yeah, 1983. And I'd set up my drums in the living room, and these are like brothers of mine. And then so we did this great hang for a while, and then I got my own place in Park Slope, a little further down, my first apartment. So I just kind of gave it a go a little bit in New York.
So what did you start doing to try to meet musicians?
The Village Voice. I don't know if people you were probably around for that, right? Yeah. So this is something that a lot of people aren't even aware of. You kind of see this magazine, this newspaper. It's a free newspaper, and they used to have these ads, these and I just methodically started going through, and I would just audition for bands, call bands, and audition for them, all kinds of stuff. I just want to be musicians. I'd start going to jam sessions, the Blue Note, and there were some other clubs around the city that would have, jazz and blues sessions. I started because my roommate on that tour was starting to break into Broadway. He was a great woodwind player, and so he kind of told me what to do, what not to do in terms of, so don't bother people. You can call guys up, maybe sit in, watch a show, but just keep track of when you call them. Don't call them twice a week. So I got very methodical. I think also because I was collecting unemployment, and you're supposed to keep track of what you're doing. So I think that I realize now is why I kept the list. Anyway, I auditioned for a lot of bands. I played with some horrible people. I got into some really fun, interesting bands. But this was kind of the real eye opener. Is my mother calls me up and says, "Hey, I just went to see Dreamgirls on Broadway. This is the original production." She goes, "You know who Red Press is?" I'm like, "Red Press?" He's at the time, Red is actually in the 90s, is still contracts, but back then he was like the king of Broadway. He was the top contractor. And she said, we were, Red and I were friends growing up. I'm like, what? I said, "Mom, I don't care about the story. Call him up." Anyway, so I went ahead and did that. She didn't quite get it. It's like, I can't bother my mom with this. So I was completely nervous. I called him up, and make a long story short, he said, "Yeah, how's your mother?" He's like, "How's your mother?" And so he said, "You sound like a nice kid. Sound like you know what you're doing." And he said, "Why don't you come down? Nick Serrata is percussionist there, and Nick was like also king of the hills, percussionist, legendary percussionist on Broadway, and he was also a conductor. If you ever watch the video of West Side Story with all the opera singers, Nick is back there playing drums. Anyway, so he said, "You come, watch the show, and pick a moment in the show, and when you want, whenever you're ready, come back, and you can just sort of audition." He said, don't really normally do this, but because the relationship with your mom from the past, I sound like a good kid, and kind of. So I went and I watched, and this band, Brian Brake was playing drums, and it was like a who's who of studio musicians. At that time was maybe kind of rare in the pit, but this band, it was like electrifying. I probably have a cassette somewhere. I watched it about 3 times, and it was the most exciting thing I've ever been in the middle of. So I was so inspired, and I figured I did this tour and I graduated. This is going to be awesome. I'm going to get into Broadway now. And Red's being so nice to me. It almost felt like an uncle, give me a chance. So Nick was very, very nice. And so there's this one big production number that I picked because it kind of covered all the instruments in the timpani and mallets and some chimes. And then and I think I picked And I Tell You I Ain't Going on Vibes, Jennifer Holiday's and the thing. So, I make a tape recorder and I go up to Purchase and I practice and I'm psyched and I'm feeling good about it and really like, oh, this is it. I'm going. Here we go. This is. And the day before, all of a sudden I panic because I had recorded on a tape, on a Walkman cassette player, that's all we had back then. And I didn't know anything about the scene. I didn't ever ask for any music. I transcribed. I just transcribed the whole thing. And I'm thinking, holy crap, these mallet parts and timpani parts, how do I know if my batteries were like fully charged? These might not even be in the right key. And secondly, at this point from college, I was really adept at learning parts, even really hard mallet parts. I couldn't read this stuff that fast, but I could shed a lot and learn them. So I'm like, holy fuck, I'm gonna have to go in and read these parts down and hopefully they're in the right keys. I don't have the bloody music. I was like freaked out. Went from absolute confidence to like sweating bullets. So I go to the show, I call up Nick, I say, yeah, I'm gonna come in. And I'm just like, I hope this is gonna work out. And I don't know to this day what was happening, but I said, hey, Nick, I'd like to warm up. Can I see the music? He goes, yeah. And then I kept asking him, he kept leaving the room and it's like, is he like screwing with me? What's up with this? So then like 5 minutes before downbeat, he hands me the book and I'm like, oh boy. So I sit down and I'm just quaking and they're going through the show. And then he says, okay, when you get this number, I'll move it out of the way you get up. So I get up and I start playing and it's going okay. But all of a sudden I'm like kind of flubbing some things. I'm making some mistakes. And I see the conductor like looking back and some people kind of like, and so, it went okay, this production number. It wasn't terrible. So then comes the big moment of the show, Jennifer Holiday singing, And I Tell You I Ain't Going. And I look at the page for this vibraphone part, and I was so nervous, it just looked like white. I couldn't even see the notes. I was like blind. And what do? I just play strong and wrong. Clank, clam, not even close. And I kind of look up at some rest, and everyone in the band has their heads down, and I'm like, oh, fuck. I am done. The conductor is just like, this woman, Yolanda Segovia, actually related. She's granddaughter of the famous guitar player, famous classical guitarist. She's just like, I can see she's not happy. She's like, so the act finishes, and I'm just sitting there. I'm like, feeling like about this big, and Nick doesn't even know what to say. He's like, so John, okay, well, yeah, your conga playing was okay, and I said, yeah, I guess the timpani. I said, I guess my timpani play was the timpani part was a little sharp. He goes, no, it was flat. And he goes, man, I don't know about your mallet playing, John. And I'm like, and at that moment, I said, that's it. Everyone in New York is going to be talking about me. This is it. My career's over. I'm never going to be playing on. And I left that place just devastated. And the next day, Red calls me up and goes, well, I guess it didn't go so well. That's all he said. And I'm like, oh, crap, that's it. So this is going to sound funny, Clayton, but to this day, I'm not sure where I got this notion. Part of it was the strict training I got. I said I studied timpani at the Met with Dick Horowitz. It was incredibly amazing player and teacher, but beyond strict. And he wanted everything perfect. So, and I also had this notion on my head for some reason that if you wanted to play on Broadway, you never ever no one ever made a mistake. Like you weren't. So between all that stuff and this experience I had, I just said to myself, I'm not ready. So I went on the road for probably almost 15 years straight. And I kept telling myself, I was very fortunate because of the tours I did and people I met. I went from tour to tour to tour, some really great stuff. I got the first national tour of Joseph. Actually, Michael Keller was playing drums when we went to watch the show. He was a drummer playing drums a lot back then. And it was a full pant for B. It was like, so I was certainly starting to feel better about myself because I was getting a lot of gigs. But in my mind, as I was doing one short show after another, saying to myself, I'm not perfect enough yet. I'm not there yet. I'm not there. And it was, kind of a silly thing because, as we all know, we're humans. Everyone makes mistakes. But that's what I believed. That experience was just devastating. So, yeah.
So that experience, it made you realize that you just had to be much more prepared when you went into situations like that?
Well, number one, people are probably laughing about this, but, number one, get the music. And, who knows? I mean, Nick, I later worked with Nick at Katz, and when I subbed to Katz, and he could not have been a sweeter, more helpful person. But I swear, looking back, that he was like kind of screwing with me because maybe he just found it funny the way I was acting. Like, yeah, I'll come in. I left without even taped it, but I didn't ask for music. It was just like, yeah, obviously, step one is get the music.
Indeed. How did you get around to subbing at other shows after that experience?
I was very fortunate, and shortly after that, it was actually someone from college recommended me to. I got the First National Joseph, which was that was like a full pamphlet B and like real money, and I did that for about 10 months and actually saved a bunch of money, and then the same roommate on the tour before I got him on that tour, and he recommended me to a contractor named Bill Mead, who I don't know if you ever worked for Bill. Bill was a contractor on Broadway for many, many years. Bill gave me so much work. I started at an old regional theater in Connecticut. You remember the Candlewood Playhouse? I've
heard of it.
Yeah. It's in Fairfield, Connecticut, I believe. And so I did a summer there. And an older conductor who's a legend on Broadway named Don Pippin. He lived right nearby the place, and his protege Brian Louisel was conducting. And Don Pippin was a conductor at Radio City Music Hall at the Christmas show and then what used to be the Easter show. And Brian started working there for him, doing arrangements. So Don was there all the time at the summer stock theater, and he wasn't being paid for it. He was just there, and his protege was conducting, and he would lean over and give advice, like, why don't you play Stick and Brush there? Or, this kind of thing. It was, it was this schooling that I got, just the very very generous master. And then the contractor, he was there a lot, and sometimes if he didn't have a woodwind player, he would play himself. So we got to see what I was up to, playing percussion and drums and, all kinds of, I did La Cage aux Folles and Brigadoon and Little Shop of Horrors. And, he was kind of really seeing what I was made of, and I play a lot of different styles. So he sent me to Europe, play a chorus line. And that was 1990. The show had just closed on Broadway after 15 years. So we had the original director, choreographer, and I was sent in to do the dance rehearsals. So, I got to be there for a lot of that, hear about the process, how the show was originally developed. And, just working with more and more musicians that were on the scene. And, that's one thing I just wanted to offer as advice to people out there is a lot of times people ask, how do you break in to the Broadway scene? And I think to only focus on drummers and percussionists it's limited. I found a lot of this stuff is just working with other musicians who are, subbing or playing shows, and conductors, it's all part of the connections. So I ended up doing like 7 different tours back and forth in Europe for this producer named Wolfgang Bosch. And a whole variety of stuff. 42nd Street, Crazy for You. I actually met my now wife, who was in the cast out there. And then this was a great one, really in my wheelhouse, is I did a concert version of Jesus Christ Superstar. And the orchestrator was David Cullum, who's Andrew Lloyd Webber's orchestrator. He was there. These were handwritten charts, and he was there for every rehearsal. And that was just incredible. And plus, it was like that show's amazing. That was right so much in my wheelhouse. So that was wonderful. I was just feeling really, really, really great. I mean, it taken me all that time. I really felt like myself, and getting feedback and compliments from someone like David Cullum. Plus, with that show, he gave me a lot of leeway. He allowed me to, even though these certain grooves were a certain way, he allowed me to just, sort of come up with parts for this version. So I approached Peisty at that time, and I went to the factory out there, invited some of the staff. So they said, when you get back to America, they were going to give me an endorsement deal. So, I felt like it took me all that time to sort of like feel, really confident about myself, and really see what my strengths were. And then Bill sent me out on a couple more U.S. tours. And eventually, one of them was a tour of the show Big, which had closed on Broadway, and they redid it. Really, really fun. Very different from Paul Pizzuti had done the show on Broadway. Very, very different version. I mean, the opening of this tour version was like a Tower of Power team. It was just some screaming big band stuff. It was really, really great. And the conductor on that was Ben Whiteley. So I don't know if you ever worked with Ben. He's an incredible conductor. And Ben was one of the conductors of Cats. And he said, you sound great. When you get home, call Ron Tierno, and I'm going to tell him, to have him call you to sub. So this is interesting how life works. So I called up Ron. He was very nice. And he said, I don't need anyone right now, but stay in touch. So a couple of months in, I get a call. He said, are you ready? I'm like, okay. At that point, my wife had moved in with me. Well, yeah, I guess we were married by then. Were we? Yes, we were married. And she was very pregnant with our first child. And we were also bought a house. We were, in a good place. She was a Rockette for 2 years and then retired for dancing, got a wardrobe. And so our life was going pretty well. We bought a house. She was very pregnant. And somehow or another, I managed to learn the book. And thanks to my old friend, my old roommate on the road, he's just you just practice till you can't stand the music and then practice it even more. And he said, just have it, it's got to be practically memorized. He said, and Ron was really, really sweet. I owe Ron so much. I mean, he gave me my first chance, very helpful. He figured out all the times he could go in and practice on his drums. And I'm sure you've experienced this before. Ron's about my size, incredible drummer, great finesse and feel. I don't know how he played the show that way. His setup was so weird. His ride cymbals this way, and everything felt like this. So at home, I set up all my stuff, that way. But make a long story short, I went in, and I did great. Ben was conducting, the show went really well. This is 15 years later. The percussionist was Nick Serrata, who was standing over me in Dreamgirls in 1983. Nick, wow. So first of all, the show, this was the last year of the show. So the second I finished playing, I don't know if you experienced this, but you feel good about your first show and then no one says anything. Wasn't even beyond that. It was like cockroaches scattering. I looked up, everyone in the pit was gone after the last note, and only Ben and Nick were standing there. Nick comes over to me, puts his arm around me and says, he doesn't know he doesn't remember. Remember, I said, I thought everyone was talking about me. He had no idea who I was. Puts his arm around me and goes, now that's how you play a show. You sounded just like Ron Tierno.
That's great.
So I went downstairs later and I told him the story about Dreamgirls. He fell on the floor laughing. He goes, talking about, no one ever makes a mistake. Huh? And he goes, welcome to Broadway, man. It was
If you like what you hear on the show, subscribe to the Broadway Drumming 101 newsletter at broadwaydrumming101.substack.com. That's Substack, substack.com. The Broadway Drumming 101 newsletter is your one-stop shop for everything you'll need to know about playing drums for Broadway musicals. When you subscribe to the newsletter, you'll learn about what it takes to be a successful pit musician with content delivered directly to your email inbox 2 to 3 times a week. For $5 a month or $50 a year, you'll have a backstage pass to the world of a Broadway drummer playing on a hit show. As a paying subscriber, you'll receive behind-the-scenes access to the life of a musician who makes a living on Broadway. You'll also be able to read every post, not just those occasional free ones. You'll get access to all newsletter issues in the archives and have an ability to participate in subscriber-only comments and events. If you become a founding member for a gift of only $75, you'll receive discounted private drum lessons and a 25% discount on future promotional products. If you'd like to make a direct contribution to the production of this show, you can reach us at Venmo at Clayton-Craddock, Cash App at Syncopated, that's CINCOPATED, or PayPal at Clayton Craddock. Any amount of support will be appreciated. Thank you for listening.
Started a whole new career, and then Ben was, he did great. And I told him all this stuff. I said how I avoided it. He's like, what's wrong with you? You should have just come, you just do it, Anyway, he's like, I'm glad you're here. So, I just started freelancing more in town. And then I actually walked dogs for 6 months. I wanted to keep the money going, get a house and a baby. And then while I was walking dogs, Bill Meade called and said he gave me my first chair on Broadway. It was the timpani and tamale chair on Saturday Night Fever. So that was my first show. And he said, Chris, the legendary studio drummer Chris Parker was our drummer, and he said, I told Chris, you're a great drummer, and I want you to sub. So I had the timpani chair, and he said, you're going to sub for Chris as well. So and that band was a blast. I mean, that was a who's who of the best studio musicians. It was just so much fun. And I met a lot of conductors. And the wonderful thing about that, as far as establishing myself in town, is that not only we had Henry Aronson, Ron Melrose from the Pit, and great conductors, and John Samorian, and all these other players. But people were seeing me play a percussion book. And actually, Chris's mother had some medical thing happen. I ended up going in 2 weeks before I had played my first show. So, and there was some kind of put-in rehearsal going on. So I actually got a power cable. They're V drums, and I plugged the things in myself. I had to just scramble and get the show together 2 weeks early. And the dance captain came down. She goes, listen, we have a rehearsal up there. I said, listen, I don't mean to be rude, but if you want a drummer tonight, you got to let me practice. Just do your thing. I gotta play through the show. I played from 10 in the morning until downbeat, to make sure I had it together. But, people were seeing what I was capable of doing. So it kind of, helped me. And then Francisco Centeno was our bass player, and he recommended me to Warren Oates, who was doing Suessical. So, I started from these connections, started to slowly get into that scene. And, and try my best, with a baby, I try my best to not go on the road. So, that was kind of the timeline a little bit that was happening. Yeah.
So in town, did you do Fiddler on the Roof and Gypsy and Flower Drum Song? And wow, it's amazing. Yeah, whole variety of stuff. And then when my daughter was 2, I think I went out. When my daughter turned 2, I got a call from Michael Keller directly, and he said, I said, Joe Moa is leaving this tour of Cinderella, and he recommended you. And it was a pamphlet B, a ton of doubles, big drum and percussion book. And I said to my wife, I don't leave you at home with a 2-year-old, but Michael Keller's calling me. I don't know what to do. And she's like, take it. I'll be fine. So it was a great opportunity. As I said, Michael's is a drummer, and I thought, working for him and him really seeing, after it was recommended, that him getting reports back on my playing is going to really help me. Even though I really didn't want to leave town, I was worried about that because we all know you lose your place in line. And so what ended up happening is, look, it sounds funny, but I owe Bill Meade so much. He gave me so much work, gave me my first show. I, met my wife, started, getting endorsements on gigs he was on, but he was, there were definitely issues. And, I felt like it was, I don't want to get too into it, but I felt like it was time to sort of connect. Finally, I'm really connecting with Michael Keller. So about the day before we leave, Michael Keller says, listen, this conductor is driving me crazy. I'm leaving the tour. I'm like, what? So I'm like, look, it's already, the contract's already done. So I went out. So I go to meet the conductor and the cast, and Bill Meade was back on the gig. So anyway, it was fine. What are you going to do? But it kind of worked out. I went out and did that. I did that tour, saved a bunch of money. And then when I came back
Michael really wasn't playing drums very much, but he was Marvin Hamlish's. Is it Marvin Hamlish? Spacing out.
Yep.
He was Marvin Hamlish's drummer, the musical director. He used to do pops concerts with them, and Marvin had this show. It was a play with music. So he said, listen, I'm too busy. He insisted I play drums, but I need subs. So I started subbing for him. And Ron Melrose was the musical director. Ron was playing keyboards in Saturday Night Fever. So, once again, like kind of full circle and playing drums for Ron. Another side of me. It all kind of worked out. And then I might be skipping some shows in between, but Jersey Boys came into town around 2006, kind of skipping ahead. But the entire rhythm section came from San Diego, and the drummer Kevin Dow and Ron Melrose was the conductor, and he said, I don't know anybody. And so Ron said, call Jon Berger. So I became the first sub Jersey Boys. And then they asked me to do the tour, but I turned that down. And then my friend Mark Papazian was out on the tour. Mark started calling me to sub tour 1, and then tour 2 happened. So I was at that point, I was subbing on 3 different tours. The drummer on tour 2 was suddenly having tendonitis issues. And so I would go out on kind of emergency calls. And then eventually I took over for about 4 months. He had to leave the tour. So I did that for 4 months. So, that Jersey Boys. And to that, then when the show closed on Broadway and it's now on off Broadway, it's like close to 14 years I've been working on that show. Also, at one point in the run, Kevin got a call from the orchestrator, Steve Orich, who said he was premiering a new show down at the Osco Rep in Sarasota and needed a drummer. So Kevin recommended me. I'm trying to think, 2009 maybe. And I met musical director Aaron Gandy. Since then, the 3 of us have done so many recording projects, shows. We premiered another show down there called Beatsville. And then last winter, it was a rare, outdoor show. My wife and I drove down. Steve was musical directing that one. So, thanks to Ron Melrose, meeting him in 1998 at Fever. I mean, it's just like, it's generated so much work, and now, and I'll talk about it a little bit later. I have this new show, off-Broadway show, Romeo and Bernadette. This is Steve Orich's show. So this is, once again, this is all connected to that show back in 1998, meeting the Ron Melrose, so it's, yeah.
Well, I'm just going to list a bunch of different shows that on your website you've played. Addams Family, Next to Normal, In the Heights, Jersey Boys, Tale of Two Cities, Les Mis, Pirate Queen, Color Purple, The Grinch, Fiddler on the Roof. I'm just naming a bunch of them. Hello, Dolly, My Fair Lady, Saturday Night Fever, of course, Off-Broadway, Jersey Boys, and others. But let me just ask you, do you have a favorite musical out of all?
Probably the 2. You say one. I think probably the 2 are In the Heights, the big one for me. That was a wonderful. That it's hard to say one. That Next to Normal was amazing. Damien created just the most incredible book. It's a hard-hitting pop rock and these beautiful things on mallets, and In the Heights was a whole other thing. But the book that Andres Ferraro created was just incredible. And plus, I got to play there all the time. That was something else. And then West Side Story is another one. I've done many productions of that. And that show, that musical is just, it gets me every time. Just so beautiful. I'd say those are the top 3. Yeah.
So you've done so many shows on Broadway, on off-Broadway, and on tours. What do you think is the most important thing that a drummer should know to be a success in this business of Broadway?
I think staying open-minded. I'm not saying you really should play this style of music or that, but I think ultimately, as my mentor in growing up, instilled in me is train as much as you can in many aspects of music. Make yourself well-rounded. I think being well-rounded and open-minded, and trying your best to get experience in these styles of music. And I think something I tell people all the time is, if you get tasked to play a show, no matter what the production is, don't just learn the music. If it's a style of music you're not familiar with, even if you spend a couple of days or a week, try to learn something about that style of music, about that language. Immerse yourself as much as you can. Go to a jam session. If you're not used to playing jazz, get your feet wet, and so you can speak that language, because it's only going to bring the music alive. Of course, as a sub, we're supposed to play exactly like the person. It takes an unbelievable amount of time and effort to do that. But I think the more you immerse yourself in that style of music and that language, it's, we've all been there with this, you're trying to learn something, you can learn the notes, but it just doesn't feel right. It feels kind of stiff because we don't understand, what is it behind this? Why does it feel this way? Why does it feel that way? So I think trying to immerse yourself as much as possible in the different styles of music required, I think that's really, really going to help you in the long run.
You've done many shows. You've had many experiences. One of the things that happens when you play a show as a sub, especially, you get notes after the show. We mentioned that earlier, as far as getting notes from your first show, but you've gotten many notes afterwards, I'm sure, because like you said before, no one's perfect. What do you do when you get notes and you're like, that's not right. I played it right. Do you accept it and say, you know what, I maybe I did it wrong, or what's your approach in receiving notes from a conductor?
Well, I learned, not that I did this a lot, but I when I was younger, I would tend to be a little bit combative. The very first tour I did, the conductor was very inexperienced, and we kind of butted heads because I was, in my mind, much more experienced than she was. And the band kind of laughed at some of the suggestions she made. So didn't really have the respect, but I was too green to know that it doesn't matter what her background is. She's the conductor. So, I kind of learned the hard way there. And so since then, I think, as many people have said in your podcast, you just say, yes, thank you. The wonderful conductor at Off-Broadway Jersey Boys, he likes to email notes. And every time I get them, I just say, thank you, and I mark them in my music, still after all this time, still get notes and, there, and there's very specific things they want. And you just say yes, and just be humble. And, and I did a wedding with a trumpet player one time who had gotten fired from some show. And he was really mad. He goes, that friggin' conductor kept giving me notes. I was just started laughing. It's like, yeah, and okay.
That's funny.
Yeah.
What do you think? A drummer should always do when subbing in a Broadway pit.
Number one is figure out how to negotiate the music and any possible juggling you have to do, picking up a tambourine, a shaker, whatever, but to always be able to see the conductor and figure that out. I was actually just helping a friend who's doing a show, to be a local percussionist on a production. Actually, your show. It's gonna be playing percussion, your show in Detroit. And I said, just part of the choreography is looking at the conductor and turning pages. You literally have to practice that. I think that's really, really important. Also, setting up your page turns. This is like the first thing you should do. It doesn't matter how the drum you're subbing for sets it up. That's fine. This is one thing that's totally your own. I use an iPad now, but if you're using paper music, you've got to go through the book. And you got to figure out whatever's going to work for you. Whether you're going to do full sheets and drop them on the floor, or you're going to do a binder, and you got to figure out. You can put back to back or do pull out things and make all the markings. And you have to practice that stuff. And for those that are playing drum set and percussion, sometimes you have multiple books. I don't know if you've experienced this before, but while you're playing, you got to turn pages here and pages there, and it's you have to practice that. and watch the conductor. This is like, you have to, especially as a drummer, you're making the sound of their baton, and you have to follow. Anything can happen. I'm sure your show, you play it the same way every night, and all of a sudden something happens. The actor skips a line or the set thing, whatever. And it's like something you played the same way is going to shift. Also, we get these conductor videos nowadays. It's very helpful, but you're watching one version of the show and you nail that. But then you play your first show and the associate's up there and does something differently. So you got to figure out all that stuff so you're not going to be thrown off, and you can just eventually play comfortably. I think this is really key. And one other thing that I think I cannot stress enough is find out when you can go to the theater and practice on the gear. That's like really, really important, because something that you realize the hard way is you sit at home and you learn the show and you have it set up exactly like the regular guy on your gear, but you get there, their pedals are different, their bass drum tuning, their tom-toms, their cymbals, there's the sound in your ears. It can be completely disoriented. I've gone to shows just totally confident and relaxed, and I play the overture, and like the guy's got his thing cranked up way loud. I can't hear the vocals, and the cymbals are too splashy. I'm like, it takes a long time to get acclimated. So, sometimes you can only get through an act at a time. Most of the time, you can't really hit the drums very hard. That's like kind of a big no-no. You got to you can play with plastics, but you got to get used to the gear. And before the show, go and warm up. Every show, even if you're playing it for 8 shows a week for the last 2 weeks, just you got to warm up, because that's like really, really key. I spoke to a couple of guys that, fake, well-known guys who've subbed a lot of shows. Like, no, I just learn the show and I go in and play it. I mean, I have no doubt they kill it, but it's like, wow. I mean,
yeah, that's taking a chance.
Yeah, man.
I've said this about Damian Bassman's drum set, and his snare drum is like at a 90-degree angle.
Yeah,
you just can't go in there and play. And then you see it, you're like, oh my God, how do I do this? And you got to get used to that. And I used to go in when I was subbing for him at SpongeBob the musical. I'd go in and it would be dark in there because I try to get there as early as possible. In that pit at that time, it was completely dark. I had my cell phone flashlight just to go in there and just get used to it. And then they turn on the lights, of course. But by that time, it's an hour. You only have an hour left to like get acclimated with it. Then you got to leave, and then somebody's coming in to play. So yeah, you definitely have to get used to the drummer's drum set.
I'll tell you another thing I learned is, for a long time, I started bringing in my own bass drum pedal. And, actually in the Heights, Joel Rosenblatt was one of the subs there. And I thought this was really smart. I never did this, but Joel used to bring in his own drum stool. The setup in the Heights was just, it was like a mini Terry Bozzio setup, but so much stuff. But I thought that was really smart, just so he doesn't have to deal with like working on the height. He had the thing set at a height. We leave it in the locker there. And it's kind of smart. Anyway, I started bringing in my own bass drum pedal because I think I tend to keep my tension very loose compared to a lot of people. So at Addams Family, I don't remember what there's this one tune where there was this one spot where you just had to play a lot of notes in a row. And Damien had the drums tuned pretty loose. You kind of had to dig in to really, get a sound. Anyway, it's his touch. He doesn't play them beautifully. So I went in the first day to rehearse, before my first show to rehearse, and even though I was playing this lick fine at home, and I realized that it had nothing to do with the pedal. The tension of his bass drum was so different than mine. It was like, and I said, "What are you doing?" And I stopped doing that. I said, I also need to get used to the pedals there. And the same thing at Jersey Boys. The bass drum, the drums are on stage for that show a lot. Most of the show, on these movie platforms, you were like almost the star of the show. It was just the way the thing was. You're on these platforms, you're there playing and moving around. Anyway, he had the bass drum wide open, big 24-inch bass drum, and he had those kind of like, I don't know the model, like the Yamaha, like sort of student line pedals, very soft beater. So I started bringing my pedal in, and the conductor who was downstairs was talking to me, and he was always saying, "Bass drum's too loud, bass drum's too loud, less bass drum." And I was like, then I realized I had my DW 9000, compared to that, I was like, dude, what's wrong with you? And then I just said, okay. And it was a struggle because I was having to play, plus the bass drum was wide open, like I said. I was having to play so soft. It was hard to play the show. I was like, my foot was started shaking. I'm like, crap. So then it dawned on me, you idiot, just use the regular pedal. And, Jon Berger, he subbed over there. And we'd always talk about it. It's like, it's really hard to play, even like on Who Loves You, to play those 16th notes in there. It's hard with that pedal. Kevin was a big dude, big feet. He could do it. Nonetheless, the point is you have to just figure it out and get used to all that stuff. And even after so much time playing the show, it was still, I think now I had to go back and get used to that pedal. But the interesting thing is, long and short of it, is that when I went back to using his pedal, I never got that note again about bass drum being too loud.
Interesting.
So, you live and you learn. But I have to say, I might think about that thing that Joel Rosenblatt did with the seat. I think is kind of smart. A lot of guys have rock and sock, the hydraulic, that makes it easy. But if not, rather than be uncomfortable at some, funny angle, you bring in your own seat, why not? So, but I don't know how much you've struggled with that kind of thing of really getting your touch, right on someone else's gear. Has that been an issue for you?
Well, speaking of Damien, Damien has a very unique way of playing, in my opinion. Not only the angles of his drums, but he doesn't hit very, very hard, but he gets such a big sound out of the drums. He just, that's just, his touch is just something about it that's fascinating. And me, I'm digging into the drums, and sometimes that could be overpowering, and you can get notes, to bring it down a little bit. So you have to get used to having the approach that the drummer has on the show and using their gear and the way that they use it. And it's very tricky at times, especially with somebody who has, like you said, a bass drum pedal that the tension is completely different. So something that you gotta like experience and learn as you're going, but definitely try to get used to their equipment and play the way that they play.
Absolutely. It was something that I got frustrated with talking about notes, and I never really complained about it at all, but it was frustrating. Andres Ferraro, just absolute virtuoso player in the Heights. He played with such ferocity. I once went in and changed the snare drum head on the snare drum. It looked like a soup bowl. I mean, he hit so hard. You come in and cymbals are cracked. I mean, and he's like a petite guy, and it was like, I call it the Hulk. His arms his muscles, I mean, just unbelievable. Like a Latin Vinnie Colaiuta, just incredible. And so, and a couple of times, I get comments about the energy is dropping. This is one of my favorites. Is my friend Joe Mowat was playing one of the percussion books, was subbing, and I'm playing drums. And the dance captain comes down. He goes, "Hey, how's it going, guys?" I go, "Good." "Oh, hey, nice to meet you, dance captain." He goes, "You guys are subbing today?" We go, "Yeah." He goes, "Hey, man, check it out. We're Latino. We're dancing to the rhythm. Don't screw up." And Joe and I were like, "Oh shit." I mean, it's like there's no joke. And there are many times they're like, "Man, the energy. You got to keep the energy up, man." And it was, Andres. I don't know. He took off a lot. I mean, sometimes I'd play 8 shows. I'd go in for one show, and I ended up finishing the week. I was there all the time. And it was great, but it was a lot because he played with such ferocity. But the interesting thing is, I knew the show backwards. I felt really good about it. But when Alex Lacamore left and Zach Dietz took over, he kept telling me I was hitting the tom-toms too hard. And I was like, I would say, okay. And it was like, after all this, I don't know, maybe 2 years in, he took over, something like that. But I was sort of baffled by that. And it was a real adjustment. And like you said, everyone's got a different touch. I mean, I don't play the same as Andres. I played the show as close to as close to as he played it. But in terms of the touch and his drums, it was like, really? I'm hitting the tom-toms too hard? It's like, sometimes he would come, he'd be in town, he'd sit outside and he'd go, "John, you got to dig in, man. You got to dig in more." He would tell me, "You're not, come on, man. I don't feel any commitment." He'd said that to me a few times. It's like, okay, all right, fine, whatever you want. And then I get a note, tom-toms are too loud. So sometimes, and you just got to say, okay, all right, and just try to adjust. It's this is kind of what we have to deal with at times. And sometimes, honestly, conductors will give you conflicting information. I've had conductors say to me, I want you to play something a certain way. And I've been playing it the same way. He said, check with the drummer, and the drummer's always doing the same way. I'm doing it the same way. So all I did is when I got to that spot, I looked them in the eyes. All I did, and they went perfect. I didn't do anything differently. The point is that, I think Tommy Igoe said in some interview years ago, he said that the conductor is always right, even when he's wrong. And that's, you kind of have to take that approach. That's their gig. They're musical director. You're not, you're not the band leader. It's like your opinion doesn't matter. It really, you can talk at the bar with the guys in the band, but as far as getting notes, it's like, okay. And you try to sometimes have to interpret what it is they're trying to, sometimes they're not very, very articulate. Someone like Alex Lacamore can speak to anybody in the pit in the language of their instrument and give you the most, hey man, when you're playing those inside parts of the snare drum, man, just unbelievable, specific, clear direction about your instrument. But other people, they'll just, you don't know what they're talking about. And you say, okay. And you try to figure it out and make them happy, even if it's, to be obnoxious, but sometimes it's just a matter of just looking them in the eyes, giving them the confidence that you're supporting them. And sometimes that's all it takes, so.
Exactly. What advice would you give to someone that's interested in playing in the pit of a Broadway show?
Recently, I had a couple of young drummers in music school that I want to break in. And, what I tell them is just work. So there's a lot of local theater, and a lot of us play school productions. A lot of these high school and middle schools, like they hire professional musicians, like just get out there and play shows, because everyone needs to work. These shows, these regional shows are all populated by people that are working on Broadway or going to work on Broadway. So just get the experience and just work. It's good to have a goal. I want to play on Broadway, but there's also there's a lot of experienced people out there that keep getting called, and people are on the same sub list for the same players, the principal players, and it takes time. So just get out there and work, and play gigs in general. Just be out there. I've been able to have some great drummers come hear me play before I was on the scene, and sometimes you can end up playing gigs, playing a wedding with some sax player for a Broadway show, and down the road. So just work. Work hard on your instrument and your craft, and just, Manhattan is like 13 miles long. So, both good and bad reputations, travel very fast. So just keep your head up and be positive and just work as much as you can. And again, just work very, very hard on your craft. And I want to share something with you. The drummer, Chris Parker, this was long before we worked together, gave me some of the best advice I think I've ever had in my life. When I first moved to town, I used to go to a great jazz club called McKell's. Was that around when you were? Yeah.
It was just about to close when I came. I came in 93, and it was, I should have gone, but I heard so much about it.
Yeah, it was a wonderful club in Columbus. I think it was Columbus Avenue in the 90s. And just mostly kind of like, Afro-Cuban and fusion stuff. The band Stuff started there. Chris Parker and working with alongside Steve Gadd, all kinds of amazing people. Anyway, I went to Chris was playing with a group, kind of all-star group, and I started chatting with him. I was brand new in town, and I was just asking him, basic advice. I remember exactly what I was, talking about breaking in the scene. Studio work was kind of happening at the time. Anyway, he said to me, I get the impression, you're well schooled and know what you're doing. And he goes, every professional in this town can play. He goes, but it's beyond that. He said, get your people chops together. And at the time, I was really pretty insecure, shy person, and he must have sensed something about that. But this is advice that I'll never forget. He said that when he first came to town, Will Lee was a good friend of his, I think from up in Woodstock. And anyway, he said he was like a rock drummer. He couldn't really read very well. He didn't really have a lot together. But he said Will saw his potential and liked him, and he kept telling people to hire him. He said, essentially, people are going to hire their friends. They want to have a good time in the bandstand. And, and so he wasn't necessarily saying, learn how to schmooze, but it's just like, get your people chops together. That's like really, really key, and, I mean, I think being on the road, like, helped a lot with that, because you're stuck in a bus with these people you wouldn't normally hang out with. And you kind of learn how to be a diplomat and how to work together with people. Not be a weirdo and, all that kind of stuff. But, I think that's really important. And, learning how to sell yourself. This is a tough thing, because we represent ourselves for the most part. If we're lucky enough to, work for certain contractors, conductors, they might, advocate for us, which is, it's happened a lot for me. But, people call you up for a gig. It's like, hey, Clayton, can you play this gig? This is what it pays. And, or I got you recommended to me. And you have to figure out in the moment what to say and what to do. Or if you just call someone up for work you hear about, you have to, how to sell yourself and how to be I think, based on what Chris said, I think people remember your personality more so than, if you're a positive person and you're easy to work with and flexible and you work hard, you're on time, and like this old contractor used to say, and wear clean socks, then then people are gonna, like Chris said, they're gonna hire their friends in essence, because they remember this person more than, this guy's got great chops, he can read his butt off. That's important, of course. So yeah.
Get your people skills together. I like that.
Yeah.
That's a good line.
Thank you, Chris.
I recently became a member of the Peisty family, and I know that you've been with them for a long time. Mm-hmm. What other endorsements do you have, and why do you use them?
Well, first of all, Peisty was my first endorsement. They're just, a good friend of mine described them as musical instruments. They're more than just cymbals, and very innovative company. They're constantly, reinventing themselves, and extremely versatile and musical cymbals. I love that. And also just incredibly down to earth company. The next endorsement I got, through a friend's recommendation, were Vader sticks. I just really liked the way they felt. And, I met them at Modern Drummer Festival, and I mentioned my friend's name, and the A&R guy at the time just shook my hand, and he said, we don't sign contracts. He just shook my hand. He goes, you like our sticks? Wonderful. Send me your resume. And he said, if you don't like them, that's fine too. But just, it was like anyway. And then I signed on with Remo Heads, which I've been playing my entire life since I'm a child. And then I got, and then my friend John Vaness, who was a sales rep for Peisty at the time, he moved on to DW, and he introduced me to them. And I a lot of rehearsal studios in Manhattan, I played on their drums and really liked them, like the way the drums sounded, and especially the hardware. I really loved their hardware and their pedals. And so yeah, I signed with them. And and all these companies, the thing is also, of course, this gear is important. I play the gear and I like the gear. It's well made. But what's important to me is that all these companies, they have all these like rock stars and these masters that represent their product. But they have these, Peisty hangs and DW hangs at SAR, and they treat everyone equally. Doesn't matter. I've called up Garrison at DW. It's like, hey man, this like wingnut broke. He like went into the warehouse and put it in a bag for me and sent it to me. I mean, this is also they got their people skills together. People chops are good. So, that's all really, really important. And the other thing is equipment's expensive. Cymbals and drums last a little bit longer, but heads and sticks. I mean, I was going out on this tour. It's like I need a couple of boxes of this and that, and bang, there they are, and it's get a nice generous discount, and but these are all great products. I highly recommend, and glad to have the support. So
you're on tour right now. Are you working on any other musical projects at the moment?
Just today, I did a recording. When the pandemic hit, I got together the home recording thing and learned all that technology and started recording for people all over the world. And so there's a record called Jazzable Comitas. It's kind of collaborated with American and Armenian musicians. Someone I went to college with, virtuoso pianist named Joel Martin. So Jazzgo Komitas was just released today, I actually posted the info on my Facebook and Instagram. And my show, Romeo and Bernadette, it's an off-Broadway show. We did a limited run before the pandemic, before everything shut down. And the fun little show that started to get some great reviews. And the producer announced that 6 weeks later we're gonna move to a bigger house. We've got a union contract negotiated between him and 802, and then everything shut down. So we are coming back. It's called Romeo and Bernadette. We're going to be at Theater 555 on 42nd Street. Previews are May 3rd. We open on May 16th. Right now it's a limited run till the 26th of June. He's determined to move us to Broadway. So we'll see what happens with that. But it's a really funny premise. Great cast. And once again, working with Steve Orich and Aaron Gandy, it's that Jersey Boys connection. Wonderful music team, great band. And I just got called to do a thing at Town Hall. Actually, the day I land, I'm doing rehearsals for it's called Broadway by the Year, Town Hall. Something that they do a couple of those concerts every year, and it's a big extravaganza with a lot of dancers and singers, and they basically, it's like a history of Broadway in different periods, Broadway by the Year. So I'm going to be doing that on the 21st at Town Hall. So it's a one night thing. And like I said, they're planning on some future dates with Rock and Roll Dream Tour. If any of you out there are listening, we have a couple of shows left. We've been playing the Villages in Florida, and then the stage in Key Largo. We're ending there. And then tomorrow night here in Newberry, South Carolina, we have a show tomorrow night. So, and then, I've been recording tracks for people at home, drum tracks for people. So, I'll probably be doing some more of that and teaching. I have some private students, and I started teaching at a private Japanese school near me in Englewood, New Jersey. So I teach there a couple of classes a week there, and that's kind of what's happening. So,
where can people find you on social media?
I have a website. I really should be more updated. It's lowercase Jon Berger, no H, JONBERGER on drums, plural. .com. That's my website, and and then I'm on Instagram, so it's JON, no H.
Well, I'm very happy that you have this show coming up, and hopefully it will go right to Broadway, because there are a lot of open theaters right now. So you can just pick one.
Well, thank you. If you want to go ahead and pick one for us, I appreciate that. Tell them we're coming.
Yeah, pick a small one so you run longer.
Yeah, well, honestly, it's a wonderful show, but it's so small. I mean, the producer's been around in the business a long time. He said, "I'm an old man. I haven't done this before," so it's his prerogative. I mean, it would be nice. I'm not going to say no, but it's a very small show, and but come see us. It's really fun, interesting premise. Romeo and Bernadette. It's May 3rd previews, and May 16th we open. So
great.
Yeah.
But, I appreciate you taking time out of your busy life to chat, and learned a lot about you. And I'm going to go and search for that Berger. Was it Berger family?
I don't know what you're talking about. I have friends from back home like, yeah, I remember the Berger folk. I'm like, what is that? A cereal bar? Is that a cereal bar? I never heard of that. What are you talking about? Don't be posting those songs and me singing when I'm 12 years old. I'll kill you. I'll kill you.
You're like reported to Facebook like this is misinformation.
That's right. Fake news. Yeah. Plus that kid, look at all the hair that kid has. It can't be me.
That can't exactly. That's not me.
But it's so nice to talk to you, Clayton. And I'm so honored that you asked me to be a part of this. Some of my absolute favorite, drummers that you've had on this podcast, and friends of mine and some of my people I look up to. So I'm so honored that you asked me to be a part of this. And And, hopefully I'll see you on the block.
We'll be in touch soon.
All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to the Broadway Drumming 101 podcast. Head over to the Broadway Drumming 101 YouTube page where you'll find unedited conversations that I've had with some of your favorite musicians. On the YouTube page, you're going to find bonus content that I don't feature on my Instagram page or here on the podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and click on that little bell at the top so that you'll be notified when a new video is uploaded. Thank you for listening and stay tuned for more.